father's life comes to a violent end.
Officers observed a large amount of blood and an obvious gunshot wound to his chest.
But the sole witness says it was a tragic accident.
He had the firearm in bed with him?
Yeah, and I just tried to move it.
He jerked and it went off.
The investigation reveals a murky history of mental health struggles.
I don't know the exact year that my father was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Depression increases the likelihood of suicidal ideation.
Until a deeper look into his personal life raises startling questions.
He didn't understand where the money was going.
There were discrepancies in the stories. He was looking for proof.
And evidence mounts that this was no mere accident.
We found plastic baggies that contained powder.
She said that he was crushing them up. Why would a grown man crush up pills to put into his food?
Leading investigators to a desperate killer who'll go to any length to get what they want.
They conducted a search for top 10 most deadly poisons to humans.
It was hard to understand. Did you always have this plan?
They felt he was worth more dead than he was alive.
The small town of Lexington, South Carolina, is known for its family-friendly atmosphere.
There's lots of great schools. There are fun things for families to do. It's a really great place to live.
Though it is one of the fastest growing areas in South Carolina, nights in Lexington are usually peaceful. But that isn't the case on November 30th, 2016.
At approximately 1:42 a.m., our 911 communications center received a call.
Lexington County 911, state the address of your emergency.
I need an ambulance right away. My husband was asleep and his gun was beside him and it went off. I don't know what to do.
He shot himself?
Yes. Please hurry. Please stop breathing.
The 911 caller was Kimberly Groh.
During the course of the call, the 911 dispatcher learns that Kimberly Groh's husband is Michael Bryan.
Okay, then where did he get shot at?
His chest area, I think. He's laying over it. He's rolled over. Can I move him?
No, ma'am, do not move him.
Oh, please.
All right, stay on the line. I have a few more questions for you. Where's the gun at?
It's on the bed.
Officers arrived on scene within minutes. They were met by Kimberly Groh. She was distraught.
When the officers enter the bedroom, they find the scene much as Kimberly described.
Michael was laying on the right side of the bed. On his left side, officers observed a rifle that was pointing towards him, but pretty much at a 45-degree angle on the left side of the bed. They walked around the foot of the bed and observed a large amount of blood and an obvious gunshot wound to his chest.
He has his arm laid across a blue towel with a remote control in his right hand. They did not get a pulse from Michael. They were able to determine that Michael was not alive anymore.
Lexington police encounter hunting accidents every season, but a man shooting himself in his own bed is a rare occurrence, especially with a rifle.
Due to the fact that it was initially reported and believed to be a suicide, each individual piece of evidence had to be scrutinized. As an investigator, you would want to try to figure out why that person would want to harm themselves. However, the rifle laying on the bed was very odd. Nobody sleeps with a rifle in their bed. Also because of how far he would have had to reach to pull the trigger. That alone didn't say that it was not a suicide, but it's very uncommon to see people use a long gun or a rifle to commit suicide.
The responding officers asked Kimberly if there was anyone else in the house other than Michael, and she said that her daughter was upstairs in her bedroom asleep at the time.
Kimberly's daughter from a previous marriage, she was asleep in bed. And once she was awakened, the officers escorted her outside of the residence.
Once backup arrives, the officers put Kimberly and her daughter in a car while the house is secured for investigators.
We treat all suspicious deaths, which would include a suicide, as a crime until proven otherwise, whether you believe it's suicide or it is an accident. It's important to keep an open mind in any investigation.
Michael Bryan was born on October 11th, 1961 in Charlotte, North Carolina. His early years were marked by a love of family, God, and the outdoors.
My dad had 2 older sisters and 1 younger sister. He was a handful. He loved to have fun, and he loved to help people since he was little. Faith was the centerpiece of my dad's life. He was raised up with a strong faith from my grandfather and my grandma. I think my father thoroughly enjoyed the great outdoors just because he got to see God's beautiful earth and just sit there and listen to the animals.
As he grew older, Michael's interests expanded into more practical pursuits.
After high school, Michael trained to be a plumber. In 1999, he opened his own plumbing company here in Lexington, South Carolina.
My dad and my mom, I'm not exactly sure when they got married, but my father had my brother in 91, and I was born in 94. It was a happy household. My dad was always in a good mood, and that mood was contagious. As a family, we did a lot together. We'd go to church, obviously, and we'd go out on the lake. We'd go camping. We were very close.
Although he was an ideal father, Michael struggled in his marriage.
My father always expressed to me that he loved my mother, but things had just changed. I was in middle school when they finally divorced. When my parents divorced, actually, my father had sole custody of us both, but I would see my mom. I really looked up to my dad for stepping up and being a single dad, and he was at every basketball game. He was at every football game for my brother in the marching band.
Michael divided his time between raising his boys and building up his plumbing business.
Michael did work in the Lexington area and all over the state. It was a pretty profitable business for him at the time.
Despite his career success, the life of a single father grew lonely for 46-year-old Michael. By 2007, 2 years after his divorce, he was ready to try again at love. In 2008, after a year and a half together, they decided to get married.
Their wedding was local, and it was mainly family there. My father and Kim had a great relationship, and they loved each other very strongly, and they were supportive of each other and growing.
Now, their happy home has been torn apart by Michael's stunning apparent suicide.
They began speaking with Kimberly Groh concerning the events that had transpired. So officers got verbal statements from her that were recorded on body camera about what had happened.
I just tried to move it so he wouldn't be in bed with it.
He had the firearm in bed with him?
Yeah, and I just tried to move it.
Despite what she told 911, Kimberly says Michael didn't take his own life. According to her, the gun went off by accident.
The barrel was pointed up toward him?
Yeah, I tried to grab the bottom, and he jerked it back, and it went off.
When officers learned that it was Kimberly's hand that was on the gun when the gun went off, that changes the trajectory of the investigation.
After speaking with Kimberly Groh, police question her 17-year-old daughter as well. She tells them she was asleep when the shooting happened and doesn't remember hearing the gun go off, leaving no one to corroborate Kim's version of events.
Now investigators have a more keen interest in investigating whether that's what actually happened.
The difference between a suicide and an accident are night and day. How do you confuse the two?
Coming up, Kimberly gives investigators a detailed account of the accident.
She actually did a drawing of the bed and location of the gun.
Investigators must question if any of it is true.
I've seen suicides, I've been to homicides. I knew something about this scene was just not adding up.
After hearing Kimberly Groh's initial statement about her husband's death, Lexington police open an official investigation.
Kimberly now has to be ruled out as having any sort of malicious intent and potentially intentionally killing Michael. So officers are obviously very interested in bringing Kimberly in to conduct an interview with the detectives with the Lexington Police Department.
It's not unusual for people who've experienced a traumatic event to not exactly have the exact facts. So we continue to just let her try to pin down the best that she could exactly what had happened.
Can you kind of go over what happened, starting with yesterday morning when you guys got up?
Well, he didn't get up. He's bipolar. Yesterday he stayed in bed all day.
Kimberly said that this type of behavior from Michael was something that had been ongoing but had been getting worse over time.
I don't know the exact year that my father was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but I believe he'd probably always struggled with it. He kept most of that stuff to himself and didn't want to seem moody.
Bipolar can be triggered by extremely stressful events, which may trigger an episode, whether it is mania or depression.
When asked what could have prompted this behavior, Kimberly explains that Michael's passion has always been hunting. And his latest depression was caused by tremors, which prevented him from shooting accurately.
He has been really obsessive over the fact that he hadn't been able to hit a deer.
So he shot at him? He shot at deer and just hasn't been able to?
This year, and that's unusual.
Kimberly says it also caused Michael to obsess over his guns.
Kimberly told law enforcement that Michael would consistently leave guns laying around the house. She didn't know if they were loaded or not, but she was afraid that something like this might happen.
And so he started laying them in the bedroom, and they were laying everywhere.
When someone's going through depression, they are more likely to be fatigued, not wanting to engage in activities of daily living.
Kimberly had advised us that Michael had pretty much slept all day while she had run a whole bunch of errands.
Kimberly says when she came home later that day, Michael was still in bed.
He hasn't had an episode where he stayed in bed a lot in the last couple months.
Okay.
And I made dinner, and I woke him at 8 o'clock and said, "It's 8 o'clock, you need to eat dinner."
Okay. And what kind of, so you heated up like a
roast beef meal. He said, "Okay, I'll eat now." And he had me get him his medicine and bring it to him.
Kimberly says they watched TV together before falling asleep. She remembers getting up around 1 a.m. to let the dog out, and when she returned, she was met with a disturbing sight.
And I walked in the bedroom, the TV was on, and the gun was on the bed.
Was the gun on the bed before you got up? Like,
no, I wasn't been sleeping with the gun.
She obviously was concerned for Michael's safety.
I was like, Michael, why is the gun in the bed? Michael. He just moaned, and I went to pull it, and he jerked, and he went off.
As he jerked, did he actually grab the gun?
I don't know. It jerked me back, and I dropped it on the bed.
Kimberly says she can't be sure how the gun went off. It's possible Michael's finger was on the trigger when she moved it.
Anytime you have firearms, there's always the potential for accidents to happen. And they do happen, unfortunately, a pretty frequent basis.
If you have to cry, you have to. I mean, it's a tough situation, okay?
I don't know why it looked like that.
Kim's attitude during her interview was she was cooperative. She made a written statement. She actually did a drawing of the actual bed and location of the gun and orientation to the room. She allowed photos to be taken of her. They noticed that she had a small abrasion on her forehead. She stated that when the gun went off, it hit her in the head.
They hold Kimberly in a room for further questioning. Although investigators find her to be cooperative, they do have some questions regarding her story. One of them is why Michael brought a loaded rifle to bed in the first place.
Depression increases the likelihood that someone is to have thoughts of suicidal ideation, which would also help explain why there could have been a weapon in bed.
But since Michael cannot speak for himself, investigators must find evidence that corroborates Kimberly's story. They obtain a search warrant for the house.
Nothing really jumped out to me. There was no struggle that had taken place. I made my way down the hallway. I went into the bedroom.
The coroner has not arrived yet, so Michael's body is still at the scene.
In South Carolina, we don't touch the body until the coroner's office arrives on scene. So while I'm waiting, I observed Michael lying on his left side. The only visible injuries that we could see at that point in time was a single gunshot wound to his chest. The rifle found on the bed was a Winchester .223. I observed the rifle laying at that 45-degree angle that it was pointed toward him. It appeared to be fairly close.
They find various other firearms as well, just as Kimberly said they would. However, none of them are loaded with ammunition.
It tells me that Michael knew his way around guns and, wouldn't store a weapon with ammunition in it.
To detectives, it means the rifle Michael took to bed was loaded for a reason. The question remains whether he did it himself.
I had 25 years of public safety experience. I've seen suicides. I've been to homicides. I knew something about this scene was just not adding up.
Detectives are searching the Brian Groh home for evidence regarding 55-year-old Michael Bryan's death. They collect all the electronic devices in the house, hoping those might provide some answers.
So in this case, phones that belonged to Kimberly, to Michael, laptops, and iPads were collected and analyzed by forensic digital analysts.
The analysis will take days to complete. In the meantime, police continue their search.
During our search, we also located a life insurance policy.
Investigators learned that Michael had a $500,000 life insurance policy on his life that Kimberly was the sole beneficiary of.
To seasoned investigators, a substantial life insurance policy hints at a motive to murder Michael. And in the garage, they find another curious piece of evidence.
We moved on to Kimberly Groh's vehicle. Her purse was in her car. Within her purse, investigator located an eyeglass case, and within the eyeglass case, he found plastic baggies that contained capsules, and some baggies contained powder. We discovered that they were sedatives that were commonly used to treat insomnia.
Michael was known to take the drug temazepam, which matches the description. When they ask Kimberly about it, she provides an innocent explanation.
Kimberly told investigators that earlier that morning, on the 29th, that she had taken those pills from Michael, that he was crushing them up.
She stated to the investigator that that was because Michael had been abusing his medication, and that he had been opening capsules and sprinkling it on his food. It didn't close the door to my questions, just absolutely made everything even more questionable.
Despite their doubts, investigators have nothing to hold her on. Though Kimberly is allowed to leave, detectives are beginning to wonder if anything she's told them can be trusted.
Why would a grown man crush up his pills to put into his food instead of just popping it, like taking a capsule? It would be a lot easier. Anytime you're investigating the death of someone, you don't leave any stone unturned. In this case, they found food in the trash can that Kimberly had indicated that Michael had eaten early that evening. The investigators took that food into evidence to be tested later by the toxicologist.
Investigators reach out to the Bryans' loved ones for more information on Kimberly and Michael's marriage.
Everybody that we spoke with said that Kimberly was a good wife, that she had been taking care of Michael while he was suffering through a little bit of depression, and that she had also been busy running the business. So we spoke to one of Michael's friends, and he said that Michael had been down on himself lately about his ability to shoot his rifle, that he had missed a couple of deer this year, pretty much kind of depressed over the whole situation.
But opinions are mixed on the state of Michael's mental health. His son, John, refutes claims that he was depressed over hunting.
He could go to the woods, not see anything, and come home super excited because he got to sit out there in the peace and quiet. And so I don't think he'd get that upset over missing a deer. Honestly, there were conversations with my father about his emotions where he would say he'd have thoughts that scared him, but he truly felt suicide is the most selfish thing you can do. He would have never done that.
When asked by investigators whether they ever knew Michael to crush up his medications and put them in his food, all of his friends and family members indicated that they had never seen Michael do that. Investigators spoke with a number of Michael's hunting buddies who all indicated that Michael was always very safe with the handling of the guns and the storage of the guns that he had, and that he never left them loaded.
Michael's brother-in-law, Jerry, says he knows how careful Michael is, so he was surprised by a text from Kimberly in the days leading up to the shooting.
According to Jerry, Kimberly indicated that Michael was leaving guns lying around the house in a reckless manner, and that he was even falling asleep with guns in the bed with him. A week prior to the shooting, Kimberly did approach him and ask him about how to operate and render safe the specific rifle that was used, the .223 Winchester.
Investigators wonder why Kimberly didn't make sure the safety was on before she tried to move the rifle. An interview with the couple's pastor provides them with a possible answer.
Their pastor told investigators that he had spoken to Michael on multiple occasions.
He said they had a large amount of money coming in, but they also had an even larger amount of money going out. He didn't understand where the money was going.
Michael had confided to Pastor Ken that Kimberly was stealing from the business.
There were discrepancies in the stories that Kim was telling him about the day-to-day in the business. I could see how much it was hurting him, and I kind of put together that he was looking for proof. He was trying to determine that he was being lied to on a daily basis. Tensions were high, for sure.
Was there financial things going on that maybe they couldn't take anymore, and maybe they just reached a breaking point?
Coming up, a marriage full of secrets and lies.
She had wrote that their marriage was crumbling.
And investigators find evidence of a murder plot.
She conducted a search for how to poison your spouse and go undetected.
Given this new information from a trusted source, the Groh family's pastor, investigators collect Kimberly Groh's personal journal for further insight on the state of their marriage.
There were recent entries where she expressed frustration with Michael's bipolar disorder, that it was becoming a burden on her. She was also expressing that she didn't believe that Michael was necessarily in love with her anymore, that she was in love with Michael.
She had wrote that she felt like her and Michael were growing distant and that their marriage was crumbling.
Obviously, it's when you have a death of a spouse and you have indications that the marriage may have been on the rocks, that's always going to add to the suspicion.
Kimberly's search history paints an even clearer picture of a woman desperately looking for a way out.
During the forensic analysis of the electronic devices that belonged to Kimberly, investigators learned that in May of 2016, she conducted a search for how to poison your spouse and go undetected. Then later, much closer to the time of the incident, on November 1st, Kimberly searches top 10 most deadly poisons to humans.
Investigators find irregularities between their personal and business accounts, but aren't able to confirm any theft. However, there is a record of Kimberly placing an online order for arsenic.
She orders arsenic to be delivered to the business that's located next to her business, which was also suspicious to investigators.
While they await Michael's toxicology reports, investigators focus on the gunshot wound that killed him.
During further analysis of the electronic devices, investigators found a search for how to operate the .223 Winchester rifle. So this also adds to the suspicion that just a few weeks prior to the shooting using a .223 Winchester, she's searching on the internet how to operate that specific gun. The coincidences are really starting to stack pretty high, and investigators are fairly convinced that this was not an accident.
At this point in time, we now are believing this is absolutely a premeditated murder.
After collecting a mountain of circumstantial evidence, police confront Kimberly with their findings. Once again, she seems to have an answer for everything.
One of the common themes that you pick up on is that Kimberly oftentimes thinks that she is the smartest person in the room. Investigators also asked her about the search that she did for the .223 Winchester. She indicated that was because Michael was leaving these guns lying around the house, so she wanted to be able to make sure that she knew how to render these weapons safe.
In regards to the search about ways to kill a spouse without detection, she stated that she was interested in crime dramas and TV shows.
Kimberly explained to the investigators that the reason she ordered the arsenic was because she was going to use it as a cleaning solution for the pipes in their plumbing business.
She had no nervousness. Any one of those could have potentially been plausible, but the more that she spoke and the more things that she said, the more questions we had. In investigations, you want to, what we refer to as, lock them into a story as soon as possible. If the evidence doesn't go with what they're telling you, you know that there's something missing.
But when detectives asked Kimberly if she'd be willing to take a polygraph test, her confidence evaporates.
And I think she had that aha moment when we asked her to take a polygraph, that she realized, wait, they think I did this. And it caused her to stop and request an attorney. Based off all the evidence that we had thus far, absolutely moved her from being just a innocent widow and witness to a suspect.
Police are 4 months into the investigation of the death of 55-year-old Michael Bryan. Kimberly Groh had ample defense for her suspicious behavior leading up to his death. So now, investigators must try to refute her claims.
We went to several master plumbers, and they could think of no situation or no mixture or no concoction where any plumber would ever want to use arsenic.
Police hope Michael's toxicology report will prove whether Kimberly had a different use for the poison. Dr. Janice Ross conducts the autopsy.
Arsenic it's sort of a natural mineral. The normal person may have as much as 1 microgram of arsenic. Michael Bryan had 39 micrograms, which is higher than it should be, but it's not lethal. That amount of arsenic probably came from somebody putting it in his food or drink.
I think potentially what she wanted to do was try to slowly poison Michael with arsenic, and that she actually did so over a period of time. And I believe arsenic played a role to explain some of his physical ailments that he was experiencing. And I believe it just wasn't a lethal amount because she wasn't sure how much to give him.
It's found that Michael had temazepam and temazepam pills inside his stomach.
The food that we had seized out of the trash can that Kimberly had fed him that night also included a positive result for containing temazepam.
This analysis points in the direction of her now having intentionally medicated him prior to her shooting him.
To prove the shooting could not have been an accident, detectives turn to pathologists and ballistic experts.
In this case, the deceased was shot in the chest. When a bullet comes out of a gun, so does powder and soot. But the powder and soot only go a certain distance, depending on the caliber, the length of the rifle, barrel, the type of ammunition. With the stippling as large as it was, indicated to me that the barrel of the gun was a fair distance away from the person. In this case, it turned out to be 12 inches.
One of the things Kimberly said was that Michael had reached down and pushed the trigger himself, but it wasn't a close contact wound. That further solidified and took off the table that Michael had anything to do with pulling the trigger. It would just be too far of a distance for him to reach.
As far as investigators are concerned, it's irrefutable proof Kimberly murdered her husband. And a blood spatter expert reveals evidence that before calling 911, she staged the crime scene to look like an accident.
It was observed that blood had been running out of the bullet wound.
Blood is always going to flow in the direction of gravity. So in Michael's case, the blood that was on his chest initially went straight down, which would indicate that he was sitting up in the bed. However, the blood pattern then begins to turn, which indicates that during the course of him bleeding out, that his body moved from an upright position to now a laying on his side position. So this all indicates that he was potentially manipulated after he had been shot.
If there was any doubt left who pulled the trigger, it vanishes once DNA tests are performed on the rifle.
The DNA analysis from the trigger of the gun comes back as a DNA match for Kimberly.
Despite the mountain of evidence, investigators must be sure they have a case that can get a conviction at court.
So we've now reached a point in the investigation where it's becoming clear that if Kimberly did plan a murder, she certainly didn't plan it very well with all the loose ends that she left untied. So they didn't want to get the arrest warrant before we believed that we had enough to prove her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt at trial.
Months after the death of Michael Bryan, investigators believe they have enough evidence to prove he was murdered by his wife, Kimberly Groh.
I think that night was clearly premeditated. I believe that Kimberly waited for Michael either to go to sleep or she medicated him to the point that he passed out. And she took his gun, she loaded it, and she shot him in the chest from the foot of the bed.
However, investigators theorize not everything went smoothly.
When our officers first encountered Kimberly Groh, they noticed that she had a small abrasion on her forehead.
I think it could have been that she had the scope up and she didn't have it firmly seated in her shoulder. And if you don't have this firmly seated, when it fires, it kicks back and it's what you call scoped. You know, you get hit with the rim, the metal rim of the scope, and it leaves a mark.
If we ruled out domestic violence or self-defense, we can look at money issues or for financial gains.
That obviously points you in the direction of the $500,000 life insurance policy that he had.
Phone records show Kimberly called their insurance company to cash in the day after Michael's death. The call was recorded through the insurance company.
When you get in call centers that say this call may be recorded for quality assurance, well, guess what? They're recorded. Because I listen to them.
Sorry to hear about the passing of your husband.
His name is Michael Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N.
She didn't seem upset when she was calling the life insurance company. She just was monotone. She had no emotion. I absolutely believe that Kimberly felt that Michael was worth more dead than he was alive.
Further investigation reveals she also had Michael's sons written out of his will.
We were not going to get anything, and that was shocking to not only me and my brother, but the entire Bryan family. Everything he did in life was for his family. Why would he write me and my brother out?
I think a combination of greed and the burden that Michael's bipolar disorder that she felt led her to snap and kill her husband, Michael.
After all the evidence came back, we were able to obtain an arrest warrant for Kimberly Groh for the commission of murder of Michael Bryan. We made arrangements through her attorney, and she turned herself in to us on September 26th.
COVID delays Kimberly's trial for over a year. But when the time finally comes, she chooses not to face a jury.
We were able to reach a plea agreement with Kimberly's defense attorney that she would enter an offered plea to voluntary manslaughter. And after the presentation by the state, and after hearing the emotional testimony of Michael's family, The judge ended up imposing the maximum 30-year sentence.
It was hard to understand. I still sometimes wonder how you do that. How do you go from loving him to that? Did you always have this plan?
I think Kimberly Groh has an absolute disregard for human life. I think that she was selfish. I think that she was greedy. And I think she was cold-blooded. I think Kimberly thought she could get away with murder.
My father loved Kim. He loved her with everything he had. And I just, it's hard to wrap my head around how she responded to that. It's affected the entire family in ways I think will live on with us. I believe my father would be proud of all of us and the way we've carried on. He will live on through us and the impact he made on all of us.
Echoes of the Gavel, Tales from the Bench. Chapter 1, The Weight of 17 Years. 17 years is not just a measure of time, it is an era. For April Johnson, 17 years was the rhythm of her heart walking on for pause. His name was Ice. He was a Jack Russell Terrier mixed with a Schnauzer, a 40-pound bundle of weary gray and light fur that had slowly faded into the frosted white of old age. He had been with April through the shifting seasons of her life, a silent, steadfast witness to her joys and a sponge for her tears. But on a damp, gray Friday in April, the rhythm stopped. April sat on the worn linoleum of her kitchen floor, cradling Ice's stiffening body in her lap. The house was suffocatingly quiet. There was no click-clack of nails on the hardwood, no raspy breaths from the dog bed in the corner, just a profound, crushing void. "My baby," she whispered, her voice cracking, rocking back and forth, "my sweet boy." She knew this day was coming. Ice had been sick, his senior body failing him day by day. But knowing the storm is coming never truly prepares you for the devastation of the wreckage. April reached for her phone with trembling hands. She had a plan for this. She had always promised Ice he would be cremated, placed in a beautiful urn, and kept on the mantel where the morning sun hit. She dialed the number for Faithful Friends cremation service. "I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am," the compassionate voice on the other end said. "Unfortunately, because it is Friday afternoon, our drivers are already off duty for the weekend. We cannot perform a home pickup until Monday." Panic spiked in April's chest. Monday. But I can't keep him here until Monday. What do I do? "You can take him to an emergency veterinary center," the representative advised. "They have facilities to hold the remains over the weekend, and our driver can pick him up from there on Monday morning." April hung up, the reality of the situation bearing down on her. She couldn't lift Ice. At 40 pounds of dead weight, he was too heavy for her frail arms to carry to a car she didn't even have access to at the moment. She needed a favor, a big one. She scrolled through her contacts, her eyes blurring with tears, until she landed on Joel Clockey. Joel was her neighbor. They weren't exactly close friends. They didn't share backyard barbecues or deep secrets, but they were neighborly. He had given her rides to the store in the past, and he had a sturdy pickup truck. Wiping her eyes, she hit call. Across the street, Joel Clockey was wiping grease off his hands with a rag. He was a pragmatic man, a guy who worked hard, kept his head down, and valued his free time. When his phone buzzed and he saw April's name, he sighed, expecting a request for a lift to the grocery store. "Hello." "Joel," April sobbed, the sound raw and broken. "It's Ice. He's gone." Joel's posture softened. He had a dog of his own. He knew the bond. "Oh, April, I'm so sorry." "Joel, I need a favor. I can't keep him in the house over the weekend. I need someone to take him to the Blue Pearl Emergency Vet. Faithful friends will pick him up Monday. Please, Joel, I don't have anyone else." It was a massive request. Handling the remains of a beloved pet is a heavy, emotionally taxing burden. But Joel, fundamentally a decent man, couldn't say no to the sobbing woman across the street. "I'll be right over. April." When Joel arrived, the smell of death was already beginning to mingle with the scent of April's lavender air freshener. He brought a large, heavy-duty blanket. April was a wreck, hovering over the dog. "Take him to Blue Pearl," she instructed, her voice shaky. "Here is the address. Tell them faithful friends will come Monday." "Okay," Joel said softly. He bent down, wrapping the heavy blanket around the terrier mix. As he hoisted the 40-pound weight into his arms, April grabbed his sleeve. "Wait, before they take him, I want his collar and a piece of his hair, please." Joel nodded. "I'll get it." Joel loaded the dog into his truck, the solemnity of the task pressing down on him. He drove across town to the Blue Pearl Clinic. The waiting room was bright, sterile, and buzzing with the chaotic energy of emergency vet medicine. Joel waited his turn, then approached the receptionist. "I need to drop off a deceased animal," Joel explained, keeping his voice low. The owner arranged for faithful friends to pick him up on Monday. The receptionist typed rapidly on her keyboard. "All right, we can hold him in cold storage because he was dead on arrival, and we are acting as a holding facility for a private cremation where the owner keeps the ashes. The fee must be paid in full upfront. It will be $532.25. Or, if it's just a communal cremation holding, it's $175. Which did she want?" Joel froze. "She didn't give me any money. She just said drop him off." "I'm sorry, sir. We cannot accept the remains without payment." Joel stepped outside into the chilly April air, pulling out his phone. He dialed April's number. It rang to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He stood by his truck, looking at the bundle in the back. He was a working man, He didn't have $500 or even $175 to front for a neighbor's dog. He waited for 30 minutes. He called 3 more times. Nothing. April, consumed by grief and medication to calm her nerves, was fast asleep, her phone silenced. Joel ran a hand through his hair. He couldn't leave the dog in his truck all weekend. He couldn't bring it back to April's house. It would destroy her. He had to make a command decision. He climbed back into the truck and drove. 3 miles away lay a sprawling local park, bordered by dens, quiet woods. Joel parked his truck near the tree line. He reached into the bed, pulled out the dog's collar, and clipped a small tuft of the weary gray hair, placing them carefully into a Ziploc bag he found in his glove box. Then he grabbed a shovel from his truck bed. For an hour, Joel Clockey sweated in the damp woods. He dug a deep, respectful grave beneath the roots of an old oak tree. It was hard labor, but he did it with a strange sense of reverence. He gently placed the blanket-trapped dog into the earth and covered him up, patting the dirt flat. He's in a better place, Joel thought. It's a good spot. 2 days later, the storm broke. April had finally called Blue Pearl to confirm the pickup, only to be told they had no record of a dog named Ice. Frantic, she called Joel. When he explained what had happened, the unanswered calls, the burial in the park, April's grief mutated into a blinding, white-hot rage. "You buried my child in the dirt," she screamed into the phone. "April, I didn't have the money. You didn't answer. I want him cremated. You take me to his grave right now. You get a shovel. You dig him up, and we take him to the cremation service." Joel stared at his phone in disbelief. The exhaustion of the favor, the physical toll of digging the grave, and the sheer audacity of the demand snapped his patience. "I am not digging up a dead dog. April, you're acting crazy." He hung up. In her living room, April clutched the Ziploc bag containing Ice's collar and hair, the only things Joel had successfully brought back. Her heart felt like it had been shredded. She didn't see a neighbor who had tried his best in a bad situation. She saw a man who had discarded her child in a nameless field. "I'll sue him," she whispered to the empty room. "I'll make him pay." Chapter 2. The Midnight Drift. Across town, in a sleeker, more modern part of the city, Daniel Drust sat in his gleaming Tesla, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. Daniel was a man who liked order, success, and the finer things in life, but he also had a soft spot, one that occasionally blurred his better judgment. A year prior, Daniel had met Timothy DeHorst on a dating app. The romance had fizzled quickly, but they had transitioned into a strange, slightly unbalanced friendship. Timothy was the opposite of Daniel, always scrambling, always a step behind, working multiple jobs just to keep his head above water. In May of 2022, Daniel's mother had gifted him a 2007 Honda Civic. It wasn't fancy, and it had a battery that occasionally needed a jump start, but it ran. Daniel kept it as a backup for his delivery business. In March, Timothy's life had hit a wall. His old car died, leaving him stranded and unable to get to his two jobs. Daniel, feeling a mix of pity and lingering affection, made an offer over text. "I can tell you're in a bad situation right now," Daniel typed. "I don't mind letting you use the Honda. Let's do this for a week, and then we will either work out a different arrangement financially, or I'll just take it back." Timothy was ecstatic. "Thank you. Man, you're saving my life," he had told Daniel when he picked up the keys. But gratitude is a fragile thing, easily warped by desperation. It was a Tuesday night, exactly 2 weeks after Timothy had taken the Honda. The week-long agreement had silently stretched, as these things often do when one party is too tired to ask for the car back and the other is too reliant to return it. Timothy was exhausted. His bones ached. He had spent the evening at his second job, sitting through hours of monotonous onboarding and training videos in a windowless room. After that, he had to run errands, groceries, laundry detergent, the mundane chores that keep a life from falling apart entirely. By midnight, he was finally heading home. The road was a dark ribbon stretching through the suburbs. The heater in the Honda was blowing warm air, creating a cozy, hypnotic cocoon. Timothy blinked. The streetlights seemed to blur into long, glowing streaks. He rolled down the window, letting the cold air hit his face, but his eyelids felt like they were lined with lead. Just 5 more minutes, he thought. Just keep it between the lines. He approached a stop sign. He pressed the brake. And then the world went dark. Timothy didn't intend to fall asleep. It wasn't a choice. It was a physical shutdown. His body simply turned off. His foot slipped from the brake. The Honda, still in drive, rolled silently through the intersection. It drifted, crossing the yellow line, the tires leaving the asphalt and hitting the soft gravel of the shoulder. Crunch! Timothy awoke to violence. The sound of tearing metal and shattering glass filled the cabin. The steering wheel jerked violently in his hands. The car had plunged into a deep drainage ditch, the front end smashing through a heavy wooden fence belonging to a nearby homeowner. The airbags deployed with the concussive force of a gunshot, punching him in the face and filling the car with bitter, white smoke. Coughing, terrified, Timothy kicked the door open and stumbled out into the damp grass. The Honda's front end was crushed like an accordion. The fence was obliterated. Within minutes, the flashing red and blue lights of a police cruiser illuminated the wreckage. The officer wrote Timothy a ticket for failure to maintain a single lane. Standing by the road, shivering, Timothy felt a profound sense of dread. The car was totaled. It wasn't his, and he had no money to pay for it. In the days that followed, fear mutated into a desperate, defensive fiction. When Daniel called, furious and demanding the $3,600 book value of the car, Timothy panicked. "You can't sue me," Timothy argued over the phone, his voice shaking. "You gave me that car. It was a gift." "A gift?" Daniel scoffed, his voice dripping with icy disbelief. "I let you borrow it to get to work. I have the texts, Timothy." "It was a gift," Timothy repeating the lie until he almost believed it himself. If it was a gift, he wasn't responsible to Daniel. If it was a gift, it was just his own bad luck. Daniel hung up. The next day, he filed the paperwork at the small claims courthouse. Chapter 3. Flight from Oak Haven. Gilbert Keel Jr. was a man who believed in the sanctity of a contract. As a landlord, he provided a service, a roof, for walls, and functioning plumbing, and in return, he expected a check on the first of the month. It was a simple, transactional existence. In February of 2023, he leased a spacious, split-level property to Cynthia and Amber Spradley. The sisters were raising 2 young children they had recently adopted from the foster care system. Gilbert felt good about renting to them. It felt like providing a stable foundation for a family that needed it. For the first 6 months, things were quiet. The rent was paid. The grass was mowed. But by September, the silence turned ominous. The first of the month came and went. No check, no phone call, no text. Gilbert's property manager, Rakeshia Betts, reached out. The responses she received from Amber were a masterclass in evasion. "We're holding the rent," Amber texted. "This neighborhood isn't safe for our kids. There's crime. People break into cars. We're moving out." Gilbert was unsympathetic to the excuse. If they want to move, they can move, he told Rakeshia in his office. "But as long as their furniture is in my house, they owe me rent. File the notice to vacate." The legal machinery groaned into motion. The notice was served, demanding they vacate by November 4th. Inside the rental house, chaos reigned. Amber and Cynthia were packing, but not with care. The stress of the impending eviction, the lack of money, and the internal family drama had turned the home into a war zone. Trash piled up in the kitchen. The walls were scuffed. "Just leave it," Cynthia yelled one afternoon, throwing a trash bag into the hallway. "They're kicking us out anyway. Let them deal with the mess." They fled like thieves in the night. By October 26th, Amber called Rakeshia. "We're out. We're gone." The next day, October 27th, Rakeshia drove to the property. She carried a clipboard, her phone for taking video, and a ring of new keys. She stepped up to the front door, inserted her master key, and pushed it open. The smell hit her first a stale mix of fast food, unwashed clothes, and something distinctly sour. "Oh, my lord," Rakeshia muttered, raising her phone and pressing record. The living room looked as though a tornado had touched down. Debris was scattered across the carpet. But it wasn't just messy, it was violent. The interior door leading to the garage had been kicked off its hinges, the wood splintered and jagged. The drywall in the hallway had a fist-sized hole punched through it. The kitchen counters were sticky with spilled soda, and abandoned, broken furniture littered the dining room. Rakeshia changed the locks, her blood boiling. She immediately sent the video to Gilbert. They trashed it, Gilbert said, his voice deadly calm over the phone. Calculate the damages. We're taking them to court. But the Spradleys weren't quite finished with the house. On November 2nd, Rakeshia's phone buzzed. It was Amber. I need to get back in. I forgot some important documents. I thought we had until the 4th. Rakeshia narrowed her eyes at the text. You told me you were moved out on the 26th. The locks are changed. I misunderstood. Amber pleaded. Please. Against her better judgment, Rakeshia agreed to meet them on November 6th. But Amber didn't show. Instead, a cousin named Crystal arrived, attempting to gain access to the house. The web of lies was tangling. The Spradleys claimed they had abandoned the property in pristine condition in early October, trying to blame the catastrophic damage on a phantom break-in, or perhaps the cousin who had been lingering around. Gilbert compiled the receipts, the cleanup, the drywall repair, the new doors, the lost rent. It totaled $5,800. He filed his paperwork. The trap was set. Chapter 4, The Reckoning. The courtroom was a theater of human folly, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights and paneled in fox mahogany. The air hummed with the nervous energy of dozens of people holding manila folders, rehearsing their grievances. At the front of the room, elevated behind a heavy wooden bench, sat the judge. She possessed a gaze that could strip the bark off a tree. She did not suffer fools. She did not entertain lies. And she cut to the heart of a matter with the precision of a surgeon. Court, come to order. All rise. Have a seat, please, the bailiff intoned. Case for 1,050. Johnson v. Clocky. April Johnson stood at the plaintiff's podium, trembling, clutching a tissue. Joel Clocky stood opposite her, looking weary and defensive. The judge leaned forward, peering over her glasses. Ms. Johnson, you're suing your neighbor for $10,000 for emotional distress because he buried your dog in a park instead of taking it to a cremation center. Do I have that right? Yes, Your Honor. April wept. He was my child. He didn't deserve to be thrown in the dirt. The judge listened as the story unfolded. The Friday death, the inability to keep the dog at home, the call for a favor. You asked him to do you a favor, the judge noted. He had to come to your house, lift a dead 40-pound dog into his truck, and drive it to a vet. That is not a little deal. But he didn't follow my instructions. April countered. The judge turned to Joel. Mr. Clocky, why didn't you leave the dog at the clinic? They wanted $530 up front, Your Honor, for the private cremation where she keeps the ashes. She didn't give me a dime. I tried calling her all day. She didn't answer. I couldn't keep a dead animal in my truck all weekend. So I buried him in a nice spot in the woods. I even brought her back the collar and some hair, like she asked. April shook her head. I didn't have the money right then, but he should have told me. He tried to tell you, Madam, you didn't answer the phone. The judge's voice snapped like a whip. She looked down at April, her expression softening just a fraction, shifting from judicial ire to a hard, maternal truth. Ms. Johnson, the judge said slowly, sadness is a much more difficult emotion to deal with than anger. It is easier for you to be furious at Mr. Clocky than to simply sit with the grief that your 17-year-old companion is gone. April sobbed, covering her face. This man, the judge continued, gesturing to Joel, did you a massive favor. He picked up your deceased dog. He drove him across town. When you failed to provide him with the resources to fulfill your specific wishes. He did the most respectful thing he could think of, and you want to punish him with a $10,000 judgment. Unconscionable. You have no case. Case dismissed. Joel exhaled a breath he had been holding for months. April turned away, the anger draining out of her, leaving only the hollow, unavoidable ache of her loss. Case for 1053, Drust v. DeHorst. Daniel Drust stepped up to the podium, his posture rigid with indignation. Timothy DeHorst approached slowly, looking down at his hands. Mr. Drust, you loaned your 2007 Honda Civic to the defendant, and he totaled it. Yes, Your Honor. I loaned it to him so he could get to work. He fell asleep at the wheel and drove it into a ditch. The judge looked at Timothy. Is that true? You fell asleep? Yes, Your Honor, Timothy mumbled. I was exhausted from my second job. And your defense is that the car was a gift? Yes, he gave it to me. The judge raised an eyebrow. Really? Mr. Drust, do you have the text messages? Daniel proudly handed the printout to the bailiff, who passed it up to the bench. The judge highlighted a section and handed it to the bailiff to give to Timothy. Mr. DeHorst read that highlighted section out loud, the part where he allegedly gifts you this vehicle. Timothy swallowed hard. He looked at the paper. The words condemned him. It says, let's do this for a week, and then we will either work out a different arrangement financially, or I'll just take it back. The courtroom was dead silent. Tell me, the judge said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, what word in that sentence suggests he gave you the car? Timothy stared at his shoes. It doesn't. Duh, the judge shot back. You borrowed a car. You were negligent. You destroyed it. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $3,600. Step back. Daniel offered a brisk nod of vindication. Timothy walked away, the weight of his exhaustion now compounded by debt. Case for 1067, Keel v. Spradley. The final reckoning belonged to Gilbert Keel Jr. and the Spradley sisters. Gilbert stood tall, Rakesia Betts beside him armed with photographs and text logs. Amber and Cynthia Spradley stood together, arms crossed defensively. You moved out and stopped paying rent because you didn't like the neighborhood, the judge summarized. But you left property in the house, and when the landlord regained possession, the place was trashed. We moved out October 4th. Amber insisted loudly. We didn't do that damage. It was an unsafe neighborhood. Anyone could have broken in. Or maybe it was our cousin. Gilbert shook his head. Your Honor, they told my property manager they were out on October 26th. She went in on the 27th. The doors were locked. She had to use a key. This is what she found. The judge examined the photographs, the broken doors, the filth, the punched walls. We had foster kids, adopted kids. Cynthia interjected, playing for sympathy. We had to get them out of there. Having children does not give you the right to destroy someone else's property, the judge fired back. She turned her attention to the text messages between Rakesia and Amber. Let's look at this, the judge said, tracing the lines of text with her pen. On November 5th, well, after you claim you abandoned the property, you text the property manager. I've been super sick. Crystal will come get our stuff at 3:30. If you moved out and took all your belongings on October 4th, why are you arranging for someone to retrieve property from the house in November? Amber stuttered. That was my cousin's stuff, not ours. I was in the hospital. Nonsense, the judge declared, slamming the paperwork down. You are spinning a web of lies to avoid responsibility for destroying this man's house. You made a decision to move into a property. You couldn't keep it up. You trashed it on your way out, and you expect him to foot the bill. The judge picked up her gavel. $5,800. Judgment for the plaintiff. We are done here. Court is adjourned. Chapter 5. The price of a consignature. Love makes people do foolish things. It blinds them to the harsh realities of finance, credit scores, and the unforgiving permanence of legal documents. In August of 2021, Kyle Dienhart was hopelessly entangled in the honeymoon phase of his relationship with Tammy Gobo. When Tammy needed a car, Kyle wanted to play the hero. He didn't just offer advice. He opened his wallet. He put down a massive $10,000 cash down payment on a $21,000 used vehicle. Even worse, to secure the financing for the remainder, he co-signed the loan, putting his name on the title alongside hers. It was a grand, romantic gesture. It was also a catastrophic financial mistake. The relationship fizzled out shortly after the ink dried on the contract. The romance evaporated, but the binding legal tie of the auto loan remained. For 3 years, they lived separate lives. Tammy kept the car, diligently making the $216 monthly payments. Kyle watched from afar, his credit score tethered to his ex-girlfriend's financial stability. But in the bitter cold of early 2024, the arrangement fractured. Tammy missed the January payment. Then she missed February. Kyle started receiving the dreaded default notices in his mail. 12 late payment warnings piled up on his kitchen counter, each one a ticking time bomb aimed directly at his financial future. Knowing Tammy's track record and panicked by the prospect of ruined credit, Kyle made a drastic move. In late February 2024, he hired a tow truck and repossessed the car in the middle of the night. "I had to cut my losses," Kyle explained to his friends, clutching the keys. "She wasn't paying. It's in my name to. I couldn't just let the bank take it and destroy my credit." For the next 6 months, Kyle assumed the burden of the car. He made the $216 monthly payments out of his own pocket to keep the bank happy. Meanwhile, Tammy's life took a tragic but strangely fortunate turn. Her father passed away, leaving her his 2000 Chrysler convertible. Suddenly, she had a car again, completely free and clear. By October 2024, Kyle was exhausted by the ordeal. He emptied his savings, making a final lump sum payment of $2,247.30 to pay off the car loan entirely. He found a buyer willing to take the car off his hands, eager to finally close this painful chapter. There was just one catch. Because her name was on the original paperwork, he needed Tammy to sign the lien release to transfer the title. Tammy refused. "You took my car," Tammy fired back in a text. "You sold my dad's old minivan. You kept my stuff. I'm not signing anything. I'm countersuing you for taking it in the first place." The standoff led them directly into the brightly lit arena of small claims court. Case for 1062, Dean Harvey, Gobo. Kyle and Tammy stood at opposing podiums. The air between them crackled with 3 years of unresolved resentment. Evidently, the judge began, looking at the case file with a mixture of exasperation and disbelief. "Neither of you watch my courtroom, because the first rule of life is that you are never supposed to cosign a loan for anybody." Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "I know that now, Your Honor." The judge turned to Tammy. "Ms. Gobo, you are countersuing because he repossessed the car. But by your own admission, you missed 2 months of payments. He was getting default notices. He had every right to repossess it to protect his own credit. I was going to pay it," Tammy protested, "and I had put money into that car. I want my money back." "Let's look at the numbers, Ms. Gobo," the judge said, holding up a hand to stop the argument. She was not a woman who enjoyed complex math, but this calculation was starkly simple. You drove this vehicle for 3 years. Your monthly payment was $216. Is that correct? "Yes," Tammy said defensively. "So for 3 years, You essentially rented a reliable vehicle for $216 a month. Do you have any idea how cheap that is? You cannot rent a bicycle for that amount of money over 3 years. The judge leaned over the bench. You are not out any money. You got a fantastic deal. And now you have inherited a Chrysler convertible from your late father. You have a car to drive. Tammy crossed her arms. He took my car. It was his car too, and you stopped paying for it. The judge corrected sharply. He stepped up. He made the payments for the last 6 months. He just dropped over to $1,000 to pay off the bank completely. He is trying to sell it to get out from under the debt of this terrible mistake you both made. The judge locked eyes with Tammy. Let's not be unconscionable here. You drove a car for 3 years for $200 a month. That was your investment. Not a penny more. Not a penny less. He needs to sell this car to recoup a fraction of the $10,000 he fronted you. The judge extended her hand toward the bailiff. The plaintiff requires your signature on the lien release so he can sell the vehicle. Tammy hesitated, the stubbornness warring with the undeniable logic of the bench. She looked at Kyle, who stood rigidly, waiting. Finally, the fight drained out of her. She was tired of the argument, tired of the ghost of their relationship haunting her paperwork. Fine, Tammy muttered. Good, the judge said, striking the gavel. Judgment for the plaintiff. The defendant will surrender the sign lien release. You chalk this up to a life lesson. Ms. Gobo, you got a cheap ride for 3 years. And Mr. Dean Hard. The judge pointed the handle of the gavel at Kyle. Never cozen alone again. Court is adjourned. Chapter 6, Beyond the Verdict. The heavy mahogany doors of the courtroom clicked shut, sealing out the hum of the departing gallery. Inside her chambers, the air was still, smelling faintly of old paper, leather bindings, and the jasmine tea sitting on her desk. The judge unzipped the front of her black robe, shrugging the heavy garment off her shoulders and draping it over a high-back chair. She walked over to the window, looking out over the city. It had been a long docket. A dog buried in the woods, a totaled car, a trashed rental home, a bitter ex-couple squabbling over a lien. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Her bailiff, Kevin, stepped in, carrying a stack of fresh case files for tomorrow. Quite a day, Judge, Kevin remarked, setting the files down. That first case, I really thought we were going to see some sort of monster who threw a dog out like trash. Instead, we got a guy who just tried to be neighborly. The judge turned from the window, a wry smile touching the corners of her mouth. You know this job, Kevin. The papers tell you one story, and the humans standing at the podium tell you another. It's always easier for people to wrap their sadness in a blanket of anger. Miss Johnson couldn't process her grief, so she weaponized it. She picked up her teacup, letting the warmth seep into her palms. But it wasn't the dog case that stuck with me today. It was the Spradley sisters, the landlord dispute, Kevin nodded, leaning against the doorframe, leaving the house in shambles. Yes, that, but also the kids, the judge said softly. Did you catch what they said about the children in their care? They said they were foster kids, right? And then they said they had adopted them. The judge walked back to her desk, her expression clouding over. That detail brought me right back to my roots in family court. It's a tragedy we see far too often. How so? Subsidized adoptions, the judge explained, tracing the rim of her teacup. The government, quite rightly, wants to incentivize people to take these children out of the foster care system and provide them with permanent, loving homes. So, they provide financial stipends to the adoptive parents. In many cases, it's a blessing. It allows good families to afford the extra care. She paused, her eyes darkening as the memory of the Spradley sisters' chaotic, defensive testimony replayed in her mind. But here's the rub, she continued. While a child is in foster care, there is oversight. Social workers visit, the courts check in. There's a safety net, however frayed it might be. But once that adoption is finalized, the stipend continues, but the oversight vanishes. The government is no longer responsible for checking up on those children. Kevin frowned, connecting the dots, and given the way those two lived, the destruction they left behind in that house, the instability, the complete lack of accountability. Exactly, the judge sighed, sitting down heavily in her leather chair. It makes you question the types of people who are accepting these stipends. They took those children into a home they ultimately trashed, a neighborhood they deemed unsafe, and then they fled in the middle of the night, leaving a cousin and a pile of garbage in their wake. And no one from the state will ever knock on their new door to see if those kids have a clean bed to sleep in. Silence stretched across the chambers, heavy with the weight of things the law could see but could not always fix. We adjudicate the damages to the drywall. Kevin, the judge murmured, looking at the closed file on her desk. $5,800 to fix a door and clean up soda stains. But there is no judgment, no fine, and no gavel strike that can fix the damage being done to those children. Hopefully, Kevin offered gently, it's all good. Maybe they just had a bad run, a momentary lapse. As a family court judge, I saw a mixed bag of success stories. She replied, we can only hope this one falls into the right side of the bag. Miles away from the courthouse, the evening settled over the city, touching the lives of those who had passed before the bench. April Johnson sat in her quiet living room. She wasn't angry anymore. She simply felt empty. She held the small Ziploc bag containing Ice's collar and the tuft of gray hair. Tomorrow, she decided, she would buy a nice frame for it. It wasn't an urn, but it was a memory. Across the street, Joel Clockey sat on his port with his own dog, drinking a cold beer. He watched the sunset, feeling a profound sense of relief. He had done his neighborly duty, he had survived the backlash, and he was finally free. Timothy DeHorst was boarding a crowded bus to his second job. He looked out the window, calculating how many shifts it would take to pay Daniel Druss the $3,600 he owed him. The fatigue was deep in his bones, but the lie he had been telling himself was finally dead. He owed the money. It was time to pay. And Kyle Dienhard stood in his driveway, holding a freshly signed lien release. He placed a bright red for sale sign in the windshield of the used car. He looked at the paperwork, then looked at the car, making a silent, unbreakable promise to himself he would never, ever, under any circumstances, co-sign a loan again. Back in her chambers, the judge finished her tea. She closed the files, straightened her desk, and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow, the mahogany doors would open again. More anger, more sadness, more lies, and more truths. The gavel was waiting. Chapter 7. Something borrowed, something ruined. The following Tuesday brought a different kind of storm into the courtroom. It wasn't about landlords or car loans. It was about the fragile, explosive nature of female friendship, wrapped in layers of tulle and white silk. Chloe Miller and Sarah Jenkins had been best friends since middle school. They had shared lockers, secrets, and heartbreaks. When Chloe got engaged to her college sweetheart, it was a foregone conclusion that Sarah would be her maid of honor. But weddings have a funny way of acting like a pressure cooker, exposing every hidden crack in a relationship. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sarah's own engagement had spectacularly fallen apart. Chloe, consumed by seating charts and floral arrangements, had tried to be supportive, but her radiant bride-to-be energy felt like a spotlight on Sarah's fresh grief. The fracture point came the night before the wedding. Chloe had purchased a custom-made, $2,400 ivory lace gown. Because she was staying at a chaotic Airbnb with her entire extended family, she asked Sarah to do her one final, crucial favor: take the dress, safely encased in its protective garment bag, to Sarah's quiet, secure hotel room across from the venue. "I'll guard it with my life," Sarah had promised, her smile tight. But that night, after a tense rehearsal dinner where Sarah felt ignored and pushed to the side, she retreated to her hotel room alone. She opened a bottle of Merlot. She stared at the opaque white garment bag hanging on the closet door. What happened next was a matter of intense dispute. According to Chloe, she arrived at the bridal suite the next morning to find Sarah sobbing and the bottom half of her dream dress stained with a massive, irregular splash of dark red wine. The wedding day was saved only by a frantic, tear-filled trip to a local bridal outlet for a deeply discounted, ill-fitting replacement. The friendship, however, was dead on arrival. Now, they stood in small claims court. Chloe was suing Sarah for the $2,400 cost of the ruined dress, plus the $400 cost of the emergency replacement. Court, come to order, the bailiff announced. The judge settled into her chair, opening the file for case for 1088, Miller v. Jenkins. She looked at the two young women standing at the podiums. The physical distance between them was only a few feet, but the emotional chasm was vast. Ms. Miller, the judge began, looking at the plaintiff. You are suing your former maid of honor for destroying your wedding dress. Tell me what happened. Chloe took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edges of the podium. Your Honor, I trusted her. She took my dress to her hotel room for safekeeping. The next morning, it looked like someone had thrown a glass of wine on it. It was completely ruined. And what did Ms. Jenkins tell you happened? She said it was an accident, that she tripped while holding a glass of wine near the closet. But, Your Honor, the dress was supposed to be inside a heavy, zipped canvas garment bag. The bag didn't have a single drop of wine on it. The stain was only on the dress itself. The judge's eyebrows raised. She turned her piercing gaze toward the defendant. Is that true, Ms. Jenkins? The protective bag was clean, but the dress inside was stained? Sarah shifted nervously, her face flushed. Yes, Your Honor, but it wasn't on purpose. I took the dress out of the bag. Why? The judge asked, her tone sharp. Why would you take another woman's custom wedding dress out of its protective covering the night before the wedding while drinking red wine? Sarah's voice trembled. I just wanted to look at it. I was sad about my own wedding being canceled. I just wanted to see it in the light. And I had a glass of wine in my hand, and I tripped on the rug, and it splashed. You tripped, the judge repeated, dripping with skepticism. Yes. Ms. Jenkins, let me explain something to you about human nature and the concept of negligence, the judge said, leaning forward. When someone entrusts you with a fragile, expensive item, especially an item with immense emotional value, like a wedding dress, your duty of care is extremely high. The judge picked up a photograph submitted as evidence. It showed the ivory lace dress, its hem soaked in a jagged crimson stain. You were feeling resentful, the judge observed astutely. You were nursing a broken heart while watching your best friend celebrate her upcoming marriage. You took the dress out of the bag, which you had no business doing while consuming alcohol. Whether you intentionally threw the wine or drunkenly tripped is almost irrelevant to the law. You assumed the risk the moment you unzipped that bag with a glass of merlot in your hand. But I didn't mean to ruin her day, Sarah cried, tears finally spilling over. She was my best friend. And you were hers, the judge replied softly, yet firmly. But friendship does not absolve you of financial responsibility for gross negligence. You ruined a piece of property worth $2,400 because you couldn't manage your own envy and grief for one night. The judge set the photograph down. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,800 to cover the cost of the ruined dress and the emergency replacement. She picked up her gavel. Perhaps in time, you two can forgive each other. But today, Miss Jenkins, you are going to pay the bill." The gavel struck the sounding block with a sharp crack. Court is adjourned. As Chloe gathered her paperwork, she didn't look triumphant. She just looked tired. She had won the money, but looking across the aisle at Sarah, who was openly weeping into her hands, Chloe realized the true cost of the lawsuit. The dress could be replaced. The money could be paid back. But the girl who had promised to stand by her side through thick and thin was gone forever. Another casualty of the courtroom's unforgiving light. Chapter 8. The Serpent in the Living Room. Roommates are inherently a gamble. You roll the dice hoping for a quiet, clean professional who pays the bills on time. But sometimes the universe deals you a Leo Vance. Marcus Thorne, a junior accountant who found peace in spreadsheets and color-coded pantry shelves, had lived with Leo for 6 months. Leo was a self-described aspiring DJ and sound curator, which effectively meant he slept until 2 in the afternoon and left unwashed dishes in the sink until they grew their own ecosystems. Marcus tolerated him mainly because Leo's portion of the rent always magically cleared on the 1st of the month, until the day it didn't. On a brisk morning in November, Marcus woke up to find Leo's bedroom door wide open. The mattress was gone, the haphazard piles of clothes had vanished, and the closet was bare. In the center of the living room, sitting heavily on Marcus's favorite rug, was a massive glass terrarium. Inside the terrarium, coiled around an artificial log, was a 4-foot-long ball python named Noodles. Pinned to the glass was a frantic note scribbled on a torn piece of a pizza box. "Bro, got a gig in Austin. Leaving on tour. Keep an eye on Noodles for me. Be back in a few months. Peace." Marcus, who possessed a profound, cold sweat-inducing fear of reptiles, stared at the snake in sheer horror. The snake flicked its forked tongue, seemingly equally unimpressed with the arrangement. For 3 agonized months, Marcus was trapped. Leo ignored all calls, texts, and emails, left with no choice and a lease solely in his name. Marcus had to front the entirety of the rent and utilities. Even worse, he had to care for the python. This involved trembling trips to the pet store to buy frozen mice, which he had to thaw in his kitchen sink, a process that nearly drove him to tears every single time. When Leo finally swaggered back into town, tanned and completely oblivious to the chaos he had caused, Marcus didn't welcome him with open arms. He welcomed him with a lawsuit. Now, they stood in small claims court. Marcus, wearing a sharp gray suit, stood rigidly at the plaintiff's podium. Leo, wearing a vintage band tee and sunglasses perched on his head, lounged at the defendant's podium as if waiting for a latte at a coffee shop. The judge opened case for 1091, Thorne v. Vance. She read over the complaint, her lips pressing into a thin, unimpressed line. "Mr. Thorne," the judge began, her voice echoing in the quiet room. You are suing your former roommate for 2 months of unpaid utility bills, carpet cleaning fees, and $400 in reptile maintenance and emotional distress? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said, adjusting his glasses. He abandoned his pet python in our shared apartment without any warning or financial provision. I am terrified of snakes. Your Honor, I had to buy rodents, frozen rodents. The judge suppressed a microscopic smirk before turning her steely gaze on Leo. Mr. Vance, is this accurate? Did you abandon a constricting reptile in this man's living room? Leo leaned forward, resting his elbows on the podium. Judge, abandon is a heavy word. I went on tour. It was a career opportunity. I left Noodles in a secure habitat. Snakes are super low maintenance. You just feed Emma mouse-like. Once a week. I figured Marcus wouldn't mind chilling with him for a bit. You figured he wouldn't mind, the judge repeated, her voice dropping an octave. Yeah, we were boys. Let me disabuse you of a few notions, Mr. Vance, the judge said, picking up her pen and tapping it rhythmically on the desk. First, a shared lease is a legal contract, not a casual suggestion. You cannot simply vanish on tour and leave your roommate holding the bag for the electricity and internet you both signed up for. I wasn't using the electricity, Leo protested weakly. Your snake was. Marcus shot back. The heat lamp was on 24/7. That is correct, the judge noted, holding up a receipt Marcus had provided. Furthermore, Mr. Vance, leaving a live animal, especially a specialized exotic pet, in the care of someone without their explicit prior consent is not chilling. It is wildly irresponsible. Leo shifted his weight, the confident swagger beginning to evaporate under the heat of the bench. I'm taking the snake back today. No harm, no foul, right? Wrong, the judge snapped. She looked at the itemized list Marcus had submitted. Mr. Thorne is not running a free exotic animal boarding facility. He incurred costs for food, substrate, and specialized heating bulbs, not to mention the fact that when you dragged your mattress out, you tore a massive hole in the living room carpet, which he also had to pay to repair. That carpet was already sketchy, Leo mumbled. The judge slammed the file shut. I have heard enough. Mr. Vance, your behavior is the epitome of selfishness. You treated a roommate like a storage unit and a pet like a disposable accessory. You will reimburse Mr. Thorne for the utilities, the carpet repair, and the entirely justified cost of keeping your abandoned reptile alive. She picked up the gavel. Judgment for the plaintiff in the full amount of $1,250. And Mr. Vance? Leo looked up, startled. If I ever hear of you abandoning an animal again, the financial penalty will be the least of your concerns. Get out of my courtroom. The gavel cracked down like thunder. Marcus let out a long, shuddering sigh of relief. He gathered his meticulous spreadsheets and marched out of the courtroom. Behind him, Leo Vance slowly picked up his paperwork, finally realizing that the real world didn't operate on vibes and iOS. As they left the room, the bailiff, Kevin, stepped up to the bench to collect the file. A python, Judge, Kevin chuckled. That's a new one. The judge allowed herself a full smile as she stood up. Roommates, Kevin, they are infinitely more unpredictable than the law. Call the next case. Chapter 9, The House of Cards. The American dream often comes with a backyard, and a backyard, ideally, comes with a deck. For Evelyn Vance, a retired school teacher with a penchant for hosting neighborhood barbecues, a custom wooden deck was her ultimate retirement gift to herself. She had saved diligently, amassing a budget of $8,000. Enter Tommy the Hammer Rossi. Tommy was a contractor by trade, but a salesman by nature. He drove a pristine, lifted truck with a magnetic logo on the side that read Rossi Premier Builds. When he met Evelyn in her backyard, he charmed her with grand visions of multi-level cedar planking, ambient solar lighting, and a built-in fire pit. He was smooth, confident, and, most importantly, quoted her exactly $8,000, which he demanded upfront to secure the best lumber prices before the summer rush. Evelyn, swayed by his charisma, wrote the check. Construction began 2 weeks later. Tommy arrived with a crew of exactly one, his teenage nephew, who seemed more interested in his phone than the radial arm saw. For 10 days, the sound of hammering and the whine of power tools echoed through the neighborhood. When it was finished, it looked acceptable. Not quite the multi-level cedar paradise Tommy had promised, but it was a deck. Evelyn paid him no further mind and sent out invitations for her daughter's college graduation party. The true nature of Tommy's craftsmanship was revealed on a humid Saturday afternoon in June. With 30 guests mingling on the new structure, sipping iced tea and eating potato salad, a loud, ominous groan echoed from beneath the floorboards. Before anyone could react, the center of the deck simply gave up. The wood splintered with a deafening crack, and a 10 by 10 foot section sagged violently, dropping nearly to feet into the dirt below. Plates shattered. Guests screamed, scrambling toward the lawn. Miraculously, no one was seriously injured, but Evelyn's pride and her backyard were in ruins. An independent structural engineer, hired by a furious Evelyn the following week, delivered a damning report. Tommy hadn't used cedar, he had used cheap, untreated pine. He hadn't poured concrete footings, he had rested the support posts directly on the topsoil. And instead of heavy-duty galvanized lag bolts, he had secured the entire structure with standard drywall screws, which had sheared clean off under the weight of the guests. Now, Evelyn and Tommy stood in the harsh light of the courtroom. The judge opened the file for case for 1102, Vance v. Rossi Builds. Ms. Vance, the judge said,